This audio book, called The Land of Sweetness, is recorded and written by me, Bonna Vercelli, and I retain all rights to this intellectual property. To begin, The Land of Sweetness, Prologue. Once upon a magical time ago, there lived a wizard who became the creator of this story. He was known as the sorcerer Chaucer, and there is an amazing kingdom that exists today because of his powerful magic. First, I must tell you a little about Chaucer and how this wonderful kingdom came about. When Chaucer was a boy, he was schooled by the best magicians in the land. He soaked their magic lessons in like a sponge, and when he was 16, he left his wealthy family's estate and went off to learn more. When he came home, he was more powerful than any of his teachers. He did not stay home long before he was gone again. He traveled to a secret cavern in the mountains nearby, and there he devoted his time to his passion for magic. Chaucer was a lone and quiet man who refused offers of riches and power in return for his magic. He was such a great sorcerer that he could travel into different dimensions. He felt his greatest accomplishment, which took years to formulate, was what he called the dust of life. When it was perfected, Chaucer pieced together a wooden man and sprinkled him with the marvelous dust. The figure began to shudder and shake. Then it rose to its feet and lurched about. The eyes glowed with life, and the mouth split into an open grin as the figure exclaimed, "You must be my father." Chaucer was amazed and delighted. The wooden man could speak. Chaucer laughed and began to dance a little jig, and right away the wooden man was dancing also, easily copying Chaucer's moves. Chaucer's joy was so great he exclaimed, "Jubilation! Well, my wooden friend, I shall name you Jube." After spending time studying and living with Jube, Chaucer brought a much smaller wooden man to life, whom Jube named Splinter. Splinter was as fit in every way as Jube. With this great accomplishment, Chaucer felt he needed to return to his family estate, knowing it had been a good many years since he'd seen his family. He trained Jube and Splinter on how to care for everything in the cavern and made them the keepers of the cavern before he left. His parents had grown old and given up hope of ever seeing their son Chaucer again. Now Chaucer realized he had been away so long that half of his life was gone. This time Chaucer stayed home, and within 6 months he was a married man. He found the joy of loving his wife a new and wonderful experience, and was happy just to be with her. Within the year, a baby girl was born to them, and Chaucer was the happiest he had ever been. Years of happiness flew by until, horribly, Chaucer's joy ended when his wife fell deathly ill. Using all of his great powers and summoning the best doctors he found, he could not keep her alive. Not even using the dust of life could bring her back. When his wife died, Chaucer was so broken-hearted that he went back to his secret cavern. He felt he had nothing to live for, and his grief was almost unbearable. Jube and Splinter sadly watched in the shadows, hardly daring to speak. One sad, dark night, a beautiful white bird appeared in the cavern with wings that glistened like snow. The bird hovered in mid-air, then with a silver flash it transformed into Chaucer's beautiful wife. Clutching at her heart, she uttered one word, "Tyla." She repeated the word 2 more times, and then in a flash, she was again a radiant bird with tears in its eyes. Winging away, the snowy bird disappeared into the dark night. In a great hurry, Chaucer descended down the mountainside and went home as fast as he could. The next day he knelt at his daughter's bedside, where he found his little girl had lost all will to live. As he held her in his arms, Chaucer promised her the most wonderful gift and adventure a child could possibly experience, if she would only get well and stay with him. Tyla's eyes fluttered open when she heard his promise, and she whispered, "Really, father?" With all his heart, the great Chaucer guaranteed his words were absolutely true. With her father's return, Tyla began to get better. Chaucer would tell her more about the gift he promised her once she regained her health and vitality. "You see, my darling, you must be strong and well to visit the land of sweetness. When you are in the best of health, I shall take you there." Her eyes glowed at his marvelous descriptions of the land he was going to create for her. And while she slept, he began working, filling great notebooks with his amazing plans. More than ever before, the sorcerer Chaucer was using his magical arts for good and for the love of another. Entering a different dimension, he did indeed create the kingdom he had described to his daughter. He found himself a new and happy man, cheered by the purpose his mission brought. 6 years passed, and Tyla grew healthy and strong. On her 10th birthday, just as her father had promised, Chaucer took Tyla to the land of sweetness. When the little girl saw the wonderful land, she was amazed. As they stood together at the top of Popcorn Mountain, her father pointed out the flowing Lemonade River and other wonderful details of the land. Tyla burst into tears of joy and told him, "Father, it is better than you said it would be. It is the most wonderful gift in all the world." She threw her arms around him and declared, "Thank you for saving me and making this beautiful land. You were the dearest father ever." For many years, Tyla and her father visited the land of sweetness and watched it grow and prosper. As the years went by, Tyla had children of her own who were taken to the secret and mystical land of sweetness. Many years passed, and the sorcerer Chaucer was laid to rest, a well-loved man who had lived a good and long life. The well-guarded secret of traveling to the land of sweetness was passed on through generations of Chaucer's offspring until somehow the way was lost and no knowledge of it existed anymore. Then, in our day and age, when magic is meant to entertain but is not believed, a boy in Chaucer's bloodline, Nick Knightsby, was born. As a boy, Nick heard stories of Chaucer and how he had been a great magician, and he developed an unending interest in his ancestor. He had his mother tell him every story she had been told of Chaucer, and he studied old books to learn more of the great sorcerer's ways. Nick wanted to be rich and powerful, and he felt being a great magician like Chaucer would bring him his wish. His mother grew old, and Nick visited her often. One day Nick found her resting in her back garden, half asleep. A white bird noisily launched itself from the branch of a tree, catching their attention. "That's it," his old mother gasped. That's it, Nick, my boy." Kneeling by her side, Nick inquired, "What's it, Mum? What are you thinking of?" Weakly she murmured into his ear, "That's the part of the story I never told you, because until this minute I had completely forgotten it. There's supposed to be a cavern of magic at the top of the ancient mountain. A white bird appeared there to the sorcerer Chaucer. That's it, my boy. That's what you're searching for." Her eyes glowed for a moment, but the light dimmed and left her without a glimmer of what she had remembered. It was the clue Nick had been searching for. In secret, Nick set off to hike the mountain, and after much searching, he found and entered the cavern, a feat possible only by one of Chaucer's descendants. His discovery of that immense cavern was the grandest moment Nick Knightsby had experienced. He was astonished to find the cavern was spotlessly clean, with a lantern burning, revealing huge bookcases of books, all in neat order. He was dumbfounded when a deep voice remarked, "Welcome. Obviously, you are our great master Chaucer's relative, for no one else could make it through the enchantments." Then a smaller voice piped, "Yes, indeed." Astounded, Nick saw two living wooden creations step from the shadows. They proudly declared they were the keepers of the cavern and had been for all their lives. Nick's response was, "Lonely?" The tallest stiffly replied, "We do our duty and life is good for us. We keep the cavern in perfect order, and we go here and there when we wish. We gather nice green shoots and juicy roots, soft leaves and nice bits of wood to shave into tender bites. We do very well for ourselves, and we keep the cavern, which is what our father taught us to do." The smallest added, "This cavern has its own spring of sweet water. Can we offer you a cup?" Nick made the cavern his home, living with Jube and Splinter on the mountain top. His introduction to the two wooden men began a new chapter in Nick's life, and over the next year Nick learned more than he ever knew before. Nick studied the shelves of books day in and day out. His most amazing discovery was Chaucer's creation of the Land of Sweetness, and the fact that the dust of life had been placed in that dimension for the use of the creations who lived there. Within a year, Nick made his first journey to the Land of Sweetness. He kept his presence a secret and was astounded at what he discovered in that marvelous and magical land. Nick traveled there many times, and the more he visited it, the more a tiny seed of greed grew until it filled his heart. Before long, Nick wanted the Land of Sweetness for himself, all to fulfill his lust for riches. In spite of Chaucer's dedication to use magic for good, Nick formulated an evil, greedy plan, one he did not share with Jube and Splinter. Pure and simple, he wanted to be rich, and he was going to use magic to reach his goal. Evil or not, Nick knew exactly what he was going to do to achieve those riches. The creations who lived in the Land of Sweetness had to be done away with. Everything there was going to be his, all his. Chapter 1: Baked and Born. Meanwhile, in the Land of Sweetness, as in the sugary and very nice kinds, people were happily living as they had since their land had been created. Gerard, the grand baker in the Land of Sweetness, had just removed his final creation of the day from the oven. On that very busy day he had accidentally shorted a batch of spicy gingerbread dough, which was the cause of a tinier than usual gingerbread girl being baked and born. "Well, aren't you a cute little thing?" laughed Gerard, as he chose blue discs of flattened gumdrops, putting them into place for eyes. He formed tiny feathers of black licorice to cleverly create lashes, framing her blue eyes. Then he chose pink icing to form her pretty lips. With a few gentle pokes, he had her raisin teeth in just right. A pink sugared gumdrop became her nose. Thoughtfully he considered, then with a smile, he decided on thin strands of red licorice which he used to twizzle bright red curls on her head. Admiring his handiwork, he observed, "As accidents go, you were meant to happen, little one. Don't really know why we call them accidents." Choosing the smallest shift he could find, he snipped it shorter, then slipped it onto the little girl. Reaching for the sacred sifter, which held the dust of life, the grand baker gave it a gentle tap, which was all it took for the littlest gingerbread girl to be born. Instantly, the powerful dust worked its magic, and she became a living gingerbread girl. Each ingredient hardened into living perfection. There were 3 sneezes as her blue eyes came to life, and she jumped right up on the table. With her hands on her hips, her first words were, "Oh, my! Oh, my, indeed! You are a little ginger if I ever saw one," laughed the grand baker. "Welcome to your new home," he said as he carefully placed her down onto the floor to meet the others who'd been baked and born that day. There was a variety of different beings there in the large kitchen, all of them dressed very much like the little girl. They were visiting and talking with excitement as the little ginger girl surveyed them from her much shorter position on the floury floor. The little girl was about to ask a question, but at that moment a lady of satin lemony taffy arrived in a flurry through the large baked and born doors. She was wearing a softly browned crepe dress, dusted with powdered sugar, embedded with tiny nibs of colored candy, carrying a fine caramel bag on her arm. The toasted marshmallow hat she wore on her taffy head was wrapped in a ribbon of white icing, decorated with the same candy nibs as her dress. "I'm late, my dears," the woman apologized, "but here I am to offer you all greetings. I'm Aunt Taffy, the head of the welcoming committee for all you newly born to the land of sweetness. We have a banquet prepared in your honor, and your first nights will be spent in the slumber suites. Within the week, we will have you into your new homes and fully settled. It's a pleasant procedure from beginning to end. Welcome, welcome." Turning to the grand baker, Aunt Taffy proclaimed, "Gerard, this is a fine batch. As always, you've outdone yourself. What have we here? A little ginger girl?" With that, she leaned down, her marshmallow hat precariously overshadowing Ginger, who drew back and declared furiously, "Well, I don't think he did all that great of a job. Look at all of you, big and full grown, and yes, I am little, pitifully little." Aunt Taffy seemed lost for words at this outburst and turned with questioning eyes to Gerard for an explanation. The grand baker laughed and stated, "Well, who knows? I'm thinking those red curls might be the cause of it. But the red curls were absolutely the perfect crown for such a fine little ginger girl." "My dear, we don't speak like that in this land. We just don't," soothed Aunt Taffy as she kindly patted Ginger's red curls. "That's easy for you to say. You're full grown and quite beautiful. You don't have anyone calling you a little ginger," she snapped back. "Well, little ginger you are, and little ginger you will be from now on," declared Gerard, removing his apron. "Poor little ginger. I must say with that attitude you will always be poor indeed. But that's enough of this. It is banquet time, and we're all going to celebrate new life." With a smile, Gerard easily lifted little Ginger to his shoulder, carrying her from the baked and born building, leading the way to the welcoming and slumber suites next door. Aunt Taffy gathered the rest of the newly born, and they happily followed Gerard and Ginger. Chapter 2, Celebration Feast. Gerard carried Ginger to a kitchen next to the banquet hall. There he located a large cooking pot. Carrying Ginger and the pot into the banquet hall, he turned it upside down on a chair and then sat Ginger on top of it at the immense banquet table. "There, little one, you'll have a fine view and reach now. Small or not, you're going to be just fine, and we're glad to have you here, little Ginger." With a kindly smile, Gerard patted her red curls and went his way, gone to take a seat near the head of the table. "Well, isn't this a wonderful sight?" a voice questioned. Ginger turned to see a girl made of rich velvety brownies sitting next to her. The girl had dark sugared caramel eyes lighting her face, lips of thick red icing, a sugar plum nose, and tiny white gum chips making shining teeth. Her cotton candy hair was thick and long, cascading past her shoulders in pink profusion. "It's quite a sight, all right, even for the likes of me. Well, now look at you. The grand baker certainly did a fine job making you. You're not like me, you're normal sized. Do you have a name yet?" "Oh, yes. I was one of the first born today, and my name is Coco. Pleased to meet you, little Ginger." "Rub it in, why don't you?" muttered Ginger under her breath, thinking she would try to keep her unhappy comments to herself. After all, Aunt Taffy had told her it wasn't nice to speak that way. Thinking and speaking were two very different things, weren't they? "It's good to meet you, Coco," Ginger responded. "Oh, look, Ginger. I'm thinking that must be Cubey Big. Everyone was saying that he would be here for the banquet. He's a wonderful inventor." Ginger turned to see a very tall man of butter brickle stride into the banquet hall, dressed in golden peanut butter nougat pants with a finely spun peanut brittle jacket. He had bright orange candy button eyes, a matching triangular nose, and a shock of yellow and orange sour straws covering his butter brickle head. Orange and white candy corns created rows of teeth in his smiling mouth of tangerine icing. "Inventor?" questioned Ginger. "What does he invent?" Coco was happy to share her newfound knowledge. "Cubey Big invents wonderful taste treats. Since he was young, he's had an amazing gift for inventing and growing new treats. He became so famous in the land of sweetness that the Cookie Queen dubbed him the Queen's unusually bright and extraordinarily brilliant inventing genius." The people here found the title way too long to say every time, so they took the first letters from the Queen's special title and started calling him Queebig, Cubey. No one seems to remember what he was called before. He's been Cubey Big ever since. He's a genius in every sense of the word. No wonder he's so brilliant. He's taller than anyone here. How do you know all this, Coco?" "I'm a few hours older than you are, Ginger, and I learned a good many things before you were baked and born. It won't take long. You'll know it all, too. We learn fast. It's just the way of it here. By the end of our being born week, we are well on our way to knowing the history of our land, right along with everyone else. You notice we're born with speech and comprehension. Oh, my, look! Here comes our banquet." Turning, Ginger saw a line of people carrying huge trays of food, led by a very large root beer barrel man. The group began placing the trays of goodies on the spacious table in front of the seated guests. The man placed a platter heaped with doughnuts onto the table in front of Ginger and Coco, announcing with a grin, "I'm Rudy, here to welcome you to your new home. He had a fine mustache of drooping chocolate straws. His mustache matched the thatch of hair on his head, which was neatly parted down the middle. Round striped chocolate lozenges were his eyes. He had a bright red candy nose, and rows of chocolate nibs formed teeth in his smiling mouth of chocolate icing. "These are fresh from Cubey Big's double delightful, delectable donut shrubs. Help yourself, girls. You're going to find every kind of donut you can imagine and some you probably haven't even thought of." Placing another platter on the table before them, he suggested, "I'd save these until the end if I were you. There are 16 flavors of gum here from Cubey Big's bodaciously beautiful bubblegum bush. We like to save them for the end of the party. It's a blast to see the gigantic bubbles these gums make. You're going to find them delicious to chew and entertainment at the same time." Ginger sat speechless and gazed at the huge variety of food spread all along the banquet table. She wanted to reach for a doughnut which oozed dark chocolate cream, but since no one was eating yet, she waited. A delicate angel food cake girl now set her trays on the table. "I am Angela, and these are puddings and cupcakes," she announced in a wistful voice. "Cubey Big didn't invent these. They've been growing in the land of sweetness as long as it has been here. They're delicious and always a favorite." Angela was wearing a dress of light buttercreams, which went very well with her lemon drop eyes, white taffy nose, tiny lemon drop teeth, and pink custard lips. Her hair was fine spun taffy, pale lemon in shade. "Well, I see Gerard outdid himself when he made you," Ginger declared. "Did you grow that size, or is that how you came?" "Grow? We are what we are when we're baked and born. There's no growing once we get here," Angela assured Ginger. "That was exactly my suspicion," Ginger snapped peevishly, causing Angela and Coco to shrink at the tone of her voice. "Well, don't look at me like that!" Ginger exclaimed. "Isn't there anyone here who isn't happy with the way they look and who wants to be different?" "That's a very odd question that I've never been asked before. Gerard is a wonderful baker, and we're all perfect as we are. He puts great detail into each of us, and we're happy to be as he made us. You are perfectly adorable. Aren't you happy as you are?" Angela questioned in her quiet voice. "No, I'm definitely not. Look how fine and large everyone else is. I'm the only pitifully small person here, and I'm not happy about it, not at all," Ginger declared, feeling quite furious. Before Angela could respond, their conversation was interrupted by a loud trumpeting as 8 chocolate soldiers who were standing by the entryway blew on long, brightly colored hard candy instruments. Their musical fanfare announced the arrival of the Queen. All eyes turned as the Cookie Queen entered the banquet hall, graciously greeting her subjects as she made her way to her place at the head of the banquet table. She was a lovely queen made of sweet shortbread cookie dough, substantial and well built. Pecans formed her eyes, with tiny pecan bits feathered together in arches for eyebrows. Her nose was a neat brown almond. She had a rosy blush on her cheeks and lips of candied red cherries encased teeth of perfectly placed slivered almonds. Her white hair was fashioned into ringlets made of sweetened cocoanut, and on her head was a delicate crown of spun sugar which gleamed in the light. Her dress was a fluffy pink gown of divinity, speckled with tiny pieces of red maraschino cherries. Standing at the end of the table, the Cookie Queen sweetly welcomed all the newly born to the land of sweetness. Then the feast began, And what a feast it was! Chapter 3. Delicious. Angela soon returned with a rolling cart of candy mugs and yellow striped glasses. She placed mugs before Ginger and Coco as she explained, "Here's some soda direct from the soda springs, and I also have lemonade for you, which comes from our beautiful lemonade river." Then she gave each girl lemonade in a delicate glass made of thin lemon candy. Coco giggled as she took a sip of the soda. "It's tickling my nose. Very fizzy and delicious." "I love the lemonade," remarked Ginger. "It's perfectly sweet and tangy at the same time." As she smacked her pink lips, Ginger chose the dark chocolate cream donut she'd been admiring, even as Coco chose a creamy caramel pudding. They were able to grab a cupcake before the platter was passed down the table. Coco's cupcake was made of spice cake with cinnamon icing, while Ginger chose a maple nut cupcake with a creamy topping mounded on top. "Isn't the Cookie Queen beautiful?" questioned Coco, as she noticed Ginger had stopped eating and was watching the Queen at the end of the table. Gerard the Grand Baker and Cube Big were seated on each side of the Queen, and the three of them were laughing and talking to each other. "Yes, she is very beautiful, but there seems more to her than meets the eye. She seems wise and kind all at the same time. For sure she's never going to notice the likes of me." "Oh, Ginger, she's not noticing either one of us. She's busy being the queen and hostess to this fine banquet. Why should she notice us over anyone else anyway? We're all equally important. You notice who's sitting next to her? Big, tall Cube Big, and the baker, who is very large himself. Why did that baker have to make me such a small thing? It's not fair at all." Gerard was not as tall as Cube Big, but expansively wider. Made of solid and smooth black licorice, his eyes were vanilla wafers with melted chocolate middles. Pale chocolate frosting created his eyebrows, and his nose was a piece of black and white striped hard candy. His lips were of a coffee nougat, and a variety of colored candy chips formed rows of teeth in his laughing mouth of rich chocolate icing. The top of his head was smooth and shining, polished licorice. Gerard had removed his pancake apron and put a jacket of caramel corn over his vanilla taffy shirt. His trousers were made of brown striped taffy. Ginger could not help but admire the three of them, each one so substantial and assured in their positions at the head of the table. Somehow she felt even smaller as she gazed around the table at all of the amazing variety of creations in the room. Then she turned to gaze at Coco at her side. "At least the baker could have given me beautiful cotton candy hair instead of these little curls. Look how beautiful he made you. Ginger, your red curls are so you. I can't imagine you with any other topping. Gerard made you perfect in every way. Look at those lashes on your eyes. I think they look fabulous. But you don't see me having lashes, do you? I'm fine the way I am, and so are you." "That's easy for you to say because you're full size. So there's much more to you than there is to me. I'm positive you wouldn't see things the way you do if you were little like I am and had to sit on a cooking pot to even see the top of the table." "Oh, Ginger, I'm sorry. I don't agree with you at all. You might be small, but I don't think you're missing one thing. So give thanks to the cooking pot you're sitting on." With that, Coco turned to grasp a tray loaded with white and dark chocolate fudge. Next came platters with slices of cakes and pies of every kind. The girls turned their attention to eating all the marvelous food being passed around, for now they were enjoying the amazing banquet being held in their honor. Chapter 4: The End of a Not Quite Perfect Day. Ginger found herself unable to eat another bite. Everything served had been perfectly delicious, and she had only tried a very small percentage of the wonderful food. "That's all I can eat," she declared, as she watched Coco savor the last bite of her pumpkin custard pie. "I know what you mean," declared Coco, as her empty plate was swished from the table by an observant waiter. "I think everyone's feeling the same, and we've all had our fill." By now the party-goers were passing the tray of Big's famous gum. Ginger had chosen an orange piece that had a distinctive tangerine flavor. It seemed the more she chewed, the more flavor the gum produced. When she began to blow a bubble, the gum swelled before her eyes, an iridescent orange which turned to peach as it grew in size. When it burst, Ginger found it easy to extract from her face, and once again as juicy and flavorful as before. Some of the others had combined gum flavors, and the huge and beautiful bubbles indeed lived up to the bodaciously beautiful bubble gum its creator had named it. It was Rudy who won at blowing the largest bubble, an immense violet shade which grew larger than his outstretched arms. At its collapse, the crowd clapped and cheered as Rudy took his bow. Waiters were clearing plates from the table, and indeed the banquet was ending. It was at this moment Her Majesty stood at the end of the table. "Dear subjects, before we end our welcoming party, I wish once again to extend greetings to all our newly born, in whose honor this banquet has been held. I've watched your enjoyment, and I am pleased to welcome you to life in the land of sweetness. Our land is as sweet in every way as its name. I have wonderful news, a surprise I've saved for the end of our banquet. As many of you know, Big has been working on something new for us. I'm turning the time over to him to tell you a little about his latest invention." The Queen sat down, and tall Big arose to speak. "Thank you, Your Highness. Many of you know I've been working on this invention a long time. I've run into a few snags along the way, but they seem to have been solved. I do say this invention is going to delight you all, as it's different than anything we've experienced, and I'm very proud of it. I'm calling it my curiously cold and creamy creation, and that's all the information I'm giving this night. 3 months from this day, there will be an unveiling of my newest creation in the courtyard of the Cookie Queen's palace. Mark it on your calendars, tell your neighbors, and be sure you all show up on the 11th of Sugarary. It's going to be a grand celebration day." This announcement caused a stir of speculation among those at the banquet. The chocolate soldiers then sounded their long trumpets, and the Cookie Queen, followed by Gerard and Big, made their exit through the large doorway. Once they were gone, the crowd began to go its way. Angela came to Coco and Ginger, sweetly informing them she was their guide and would take them to their rooms in the slumber suites. As she led them down a long, sugar-encrusted hallway, Angela chatted in excitement. Big's curiously cold and creamy creation. Don't you just love the sound of it? What do you think it could be? Maybe some kind of creamy, cold drink? I remember when he unveiled the invention he called a new way to make cheesecake. We were all laughing because we grow cheesecake just fine in this land. It appears quite often on a complete cake tree, so we felt he hadn't really invented anything different at all. We were wrong. His new way to make cheesecake tree is wonderful. There was a tray of them tonight loaded with plain cheesecake, chocolate cheesecake, pumpkin cheesecake, toffee cheesecake, and on and on. They grow with different toppings too. Cherry, strawberry, nuts, you name it. Once we tried it, there was no more laughing going on. He's a genius in every way. They stopped at two doors right next to each other. Angela announced, "Your rooms are ready. I hope your first day in your new life has been wonderful for you both." A sign with Coco's name written in dark chocolate hung on one door, while the other door bore a placard with the words "Little Ginger" written in white icing dusted with cinnamon. This placard was placed low on the door, at Ginger's eye level. Angela opened each door, and the girls bid each other good night before entering their sleeping room. Ginger's room had a small bed of carved wintergreen logs, supporting a mattress of sponge cake, a bright green coverlet of quilted marshmallows, and a matching puffy marshmallow pillow. Now that Ginger was alone, she could express herself, and that's just what she did. "Ooh, rub it in my face, why don't they? Put my sign way down on the door so anyone can see it's for a little person like me." With that, she stamped her small foot and crossly folded her arms. There was no one to see or care, and it didn't take long before she crawled under the soft green coverlet, and, in spite of her unhappiness, she was soon sound asleep. Chapter 5. New Homes. A few days later, Aunt Taffy was busily talking as she escorted little Ginger and Coco through the streets of Sugartown, explaining the sights. "Now, this is the growery. Once you are settled into your homes, you can come here to pick startings for what you want to grow on your property. Of course, you both have your own complete cake tree and perfect pie tree already planted and growing. They come with each house. You make any other choices of what appeals to you here at the growery and go to work from there." "Where do we get our clothes?" questioned Coco, who had admired Aunt Taffy's bright yellow dress of spun lemon drops. "Get our clothes? Oh, my dear, we all make our own clothes. That's part of what we do here in the land of sweetness. It's a creative endeavor that passes the time in a fun and inventive way. You'll learn how, as each one of us seems to have our own flair and style." This information was of great interest to Ginger, who had noticed the originality of each person's wardrobe. "Even the Queen?" gasped Coco. "Oh, yes, my dear. She makes her own dresses. It's a very personal project we wouldn't want to leave to just anyone to do, Queen or not. We find great pleasure in creating what we wear. So that's why each one of the newly born girls is wearing these striped candy shifts, and the boys have matching pants and shirts. We don't have to wear them forever. They're standard issue, dear, just to get you through to the day you make your first clothing creation. Once that happens, you turn those clothes back to the Baked and Born building for the next time the Queen has Gerard bake a few more newcomers. This bit of news gave Ginger a happy feeling, because earlier, when they had passed a bush of bright red cinnamon candies, she had thought how great those red balls would look as an accent on a pretty dress. Now, Aunt Taffy was leading them toward the outskirts of town, and as they went up the path to the top of a small hill, she stopped for them to admire the view. Both Coco and Ginger stood in silence, staring at the lovely sight before them. A bright river gently looped in the distance, with grasses growing along its banks. Tall reeds in many colors swayed in the breeze. They could also see the immense variegated forest of beautifully striped candy trees. They also knew the forest contained an amazing variety of different colored and flavored trees. In the other direction, there was a tall white mountain with a brown path winding up to its top. "That is our fine and beautiful Lemonade River, my dears," Aunt Taffy explained. "Popcorn Mountain in the distance is always a delightful way to spend a day's outing. There's a pool of melted butter at the top, and the path you see winding to the top is pure caramel." At that moment Aunt Taffy shielded her eyes and squinted as she peered intently into the distance. "Oh, my goodness, look at that! That bank of clouds looks like they're heading right towards Popcorn Mountain. Well, that changes this day's plans. We do have to hurry along now. We are very close to your home, Coco dear. It's just around this next bend in the path." Ginger's little legs were on the run to keep up with Aunt Taffy's increased speed. They arrived at a pretty home built of toffee bricks with a gabled roof of peanut brittle. "This is your house, Coco. You will find you have everything you need and a lovely location. So make yourself at home, my dear. I'm off now, as Ginger needs to be taken to her home next. You will find Ginger's house down the path to the left, almost to the variegated forest." "Wait, would you like to come in?" Coco invited them. "Ordinarily, I'd love to, and I will certainly be back to visit soon, but not today. See those clouds? I have to take Ginger to her house and be on my way." "Are those clouds something to be worried about?" Coco questioned. Aunt Taffy laughed. "Oh, no, dear, that's not it at all. Those pink clouds are cloud candy, an amazing, tasty treat. We wanted to serve some at your banquet, but no such luck. They are very rare to capture, and that only happens when the wind blows them right over the top of Popcorn Mountain. It looks as though I have time to get little Ginger to her home, then rush to my house to get my happy harvest basket, and hurry to the top of Popcorn Mountain in time to fill it. That is what my rush is all about. You have a basic knowledge of this land, but you will find you learn more each day. Life is wonderful here. We're on our way now, dear, so enjoy your new home." Turning, Ginger and Aunt Taffy hurried down the path, waving goodbye to Coco as they left. "How far down the path is this house of mine?" groaned Ginger, trying to keep up with Aunt Taffy's strides. "We're here, my little dear. This is it." Ginger stopped, for there it was, her own little home, nestled at the end of the path. Her home was made of gingerbread bricks glued together with white sugar icing, with a fine almond brittle roof. In the not far distance was the colorful variegated forest, and a sweet, spicy scent filled the air. "Look at this, Ginger. Your complete cake tree has buds already, and your perfect pie tree has a pie that should be ready before the week is over. They have both transplanted very well. This brown sugar they're rooted in seems especially rich this close to the forest. What a lovely location you have. Well, my little dear, I must be off. Wish me luck in capturing some cloud candy. It is your very own place. So go inside and get to know your little home." With those words, Aunt Taffy rapidly turned and disappeared up the path that led to Sugartown, while Ginger stood in her own yard for the first time. "What's with these people?" Ginger said out loud. "They make me littler than everyone else, and then rub it in all they can. They give me a house smaller than everyone else's and think I won't notice that. Let's add injury to insult and make the little thing walk clear to the forest. How about that? Then let's keep calling her Little Dear to remind her all the more." Ginger kicked one of the colored hard rock candies that lay scattered on the ground. "Well, I might as well go inside. After all, it is my house." Opening her shiny red front door, she found it to be made of bright red hot cinnamon candy. Ginger experienced a little thrill of anticipation as she entered her new home for the first time. The walls inside were the same iced gingerbread bricks as outside. She was standing in a small entryway with a red candy floor. Neatly placed in the living room was a long sofa and matching easy chair built of sturdy cake, iced in a burnt orange color, which went very well with the russet gingerbread brick walls and yellow candy floor. There were side tables and a small center table made of shining ivory taffy. The kitchen was equipped with wide counters in an amber brown, and the table and chairs were formed from caramel taffy, comfortable and smooth. Ginger found her bedroom had a four-poster bed made of striped root beer barrel logs. The bed had a fine sponge cake mattress with a puffy pink marshmallow comforter and matching pillows. There was a chest of drawers fashioned from hard horehound candy with drawers that slid open and shut easily, and a small chair made from the same candy. The chair was cushioned with ruffled pink marshmallow pillows. Ginger examined each room, lying on the bed, testing the chairs, looking out her windows. At last she spoke aloud, stating, "Well, it's terribly small and a lousy location, but it's going to have to do. It would have been nice if they had consulted me in the first place. I can see there's no way they're going to do that with an insignificant little thing like me." Chapter 6. Rare Good Fun. Now that she had explored the inside of her home, Ginger decided to go back outside to get a better look at her yard. First, she closely checked the two fine trees growing in the far corners of her front yard. Sure enough, on the perfect pie tree there was a well-formed pie and two smaller pies growing. She was glad Aunt Taffy had remarked it would be a few days until it was ready, or she might have picked it right then. Each pie was covered with a supple candy shell, and peeking under the covering, she could tell it would be a bright red cherry pie with an open lattice crust. Two other pies were developing. One was pumpkin, but what the other would grow into, Ginger wasn't able to tell. Her complete cake tree also had three young cakes forming, and each cake was draped with the same supple candy covering. Ginger found each one to be very different from the other. A yellow cake with a lemony aroma was growing into a lemon cake with soft yellow icing. A rich chocolate cake was budding next to it, and another white cake with a distinctive coconut aroma was forming in the last little cake Ginger checked. Her lovely yard was fenced with a bright red and white cinnamon mint log fence, which complemented her shiny red door. There were small fences marking beds for planting along the sides of the house, and a green and white wintergreen mint fence around a garden area in the back. Next to the garden, there was a shed made of neatly put together peppermint logs, where Ginger found gardening tools for digging and a rock candy wheelbarrow just her size. Her yard had an abundance of colorful hard candies scattered over the brown sugar ground. Putting 2 lime green candies in her mouth, she went inside to explore the contents of her kitchen cupboards, which were stocked with a variety of sweets. Among them was a plate of jelly tarts. Choosing one oozing purple jelly, Ginger continued her exploration when she came upon a lightweight, thin candy basket with the words "Happy Harvest Basket" melted into the handle. "This is what Aunt Taffy was going home to get," remarked Ginger to herself as she examined it. The basket was covered with the same thin candy fashioned so one could slide it open halfway. "I'm thinking this must be so the candy can't float out. Really quite clever." With that thought, she had a sudden idea. Ginger rushed out her door and headed towards Popcorn Mountain in the distance, her basket in her hand. "Well, why not? If those clouds are all so rare to capture, I might as well go while the getting's good." As Ginger approached the base of Popcorn Mountain, there were others hurrying up the caramel path to the top. Following their example, she scooped a few handfuls of popcorn into her basket, enjoying bites of it on her way. She found she preferred the popcorn at the edge of the path, as it was gooey with caramel, giving it a wonderful flavor. When she reached the top, there was indeed a shining pool of melted butter. Aunt Taffy, with her basket in hand, was also there, along with a small taffy girl carrying a tiny basket of her own. "Well, little Ginger, you are industrious to be out so soon. This is my daughter, Taffyette." Ginger found herself looking down at the tiny taffy girl, made in the same lemony shade of taffy as her mother. She had lovely green bonbon eyes, a round candy nose, lips of pink frosting with tiny candy teeth, her features being miniatures of Aunt Taffy's. While her mother's long yellow licorice whip hair was secured in a bun with thin white candy sticks, Taffyette's hung past her shoulders in finer strands of the same yellow licorice. Seeing the puzzled expression on Ginger's face, Aunt Taffy laughed. "I begged Gerard for a little girl, so he created Taffyette just for me. That's how it's done around here." "It's nice to meet someone smaller than myself," Ginger responded, even as the small taffy girl gave her a shy smile. Just then, a large woman made of pound cake shouted, "It's here!" Ginger turned to see the clouds had rolled over the mountaintop and people were filling their baskets as fast as they could. Standing on her tiptoes, she found she still had to leap to be able to snag pieces of the fine fluff, slip them into her basket, then slide it shut before leaping for more. It was by far the most exciting event she had experienced in her brief life. It was exhilarating to fly into the air and grab the wonderful cloud treat. Once the clouds moved on their way, Ginger collapsed onto the popcorn, laughing and out of breath. Aunt Taffy had filled her basket full and then held Taffyette as high as she could so the child could harvest the cloud candy for her own little basket. Now the three of them were ready to enjoy their harvest. Ginger watched Aunt Taffy slip some of the fine fluff out of her basket and into Taffyette's and then her own mouth. Following suit, Ginger did the same. Immediately her eyes widened as she experienced the intensely sweet flavor of the melting cloud candy. Even as it evaporated in her mouth, it changed from one amazing flavor to another, causing her to exclaim, "Oh, my!" Aunt Taffy laughed. You've no idea how lucky you are to get to try this at such a young age, Ginger. You're very fortunate. This is the rarest treat in the land, and you have already managed a basketful. Chapter 7. Clever up to a point. Once Ginger parted company with Aunt Taffy and Taffyette, she decided to go to the Lemonade River. She was happily tired, but also quite thirsty. On her way, she kept slipping pieces of the incredibly delicious cloud candy into her mouth, savoring the amazing tastes as the candy changed from one stunning flavor to another. Okay, no more. I've got to save some. No telling when this will happen again, she finally said out loud. Then a little frown twisted her mouth as she thought that her basket could have been even fuller if only she'd been taller like the others. It was a very wretched thought, which kept her quite unhappy all the way to the bank of the river. Carefully placing her basket on the ground, she cupped her hands in the sweet liquid, drinking as well as she could. There were grasses growing soft and lush in shades of yellow, orange, and green. Ginger reached down and picked 3 thick blades of grass, one in each color. They were deliciously chewy, tart, and tangy, lemon, orange, and lime. The tall reeds that grew along the bank of the river were varied colors, long licorice whips in many flavors. She broke off a long strawberry reed and took a bite off the top, creating a hollow straw. Lying on the bank of the river, Ginger found she was able to sip cold lemonade through the giant licorice straw as she relaxed, greatly pleased with her clever discovery. The pink candy clouds had moved across the land, casting their shadows where Ginger lay on the river bank, leaving Popcorn Mountain behind them as they traveled on their way. It had been an exciting and adventurous day. Tomorrow Aunt Taffy was going to visit Coco and Ginger to give them lessons in making clothes for themselves. With that thought, Ginger grabbed her basket and went home a different route. Down this new path, she at last came to the bushes she had in mind. They were growing round, red cinnamon candies, exactly what she wanted for her first dress. She filled the pockets of her striped candy shift. Then she popped one in her mouth. "Oh, yum!" she exclaimed out loud at the deliciousness of the round, hot cinnamon ball, which was soft and spicy. "Mmm, mmm," she murmured with appreciation, and then carefully picked another handful to eat on her way home. Once she had finished her delicious snack, her self-satisfied mood evaporated, and a dour expression crossed her face. She began to think once again of how the others had harvested more cloud candy than she had because of their height. These thoughts led Ginger to think of how much more ground bigger people covered in one step than she did, which led to the deep unfairness of Gerard, who was not a grand baker in Ginger's estimation at all. By the time she reached her home, it was as though an unhappy black cloud was all around her. The day was done, and she crawled into her own bed for the first time. But the stewing of her mind kept her awake for a good long time before she fell into an unhappy and troubled sleep. Chapter 8. Colorful Creations. The next day the smiling sun was high in the sky before Ginger spotted Aunt Taffy approaching in the distance. She was pushing a wheelbarrow of material for Ginger's clothes, and Taffyette was riding on top of her load. "Good day, little Ginger," Aunt Taffy called as she rolled her wheelbarrow to a stop at Ginger's gate. I've brought some lovely pieces of pressed gingerbread we can put together to make your first dress," she informed Ginger as she lifted Taffyette to the ground. Mother and daughter were dressed in matching sundresses of spun lime drops, with glazed sugar ruffles around the neck and hem. Aunt Taffy had a wide-brimmed lime green candy shell hat with a band of lemon yellow icing. Taffyette was a miniature replica in her sundress, although there was no hat on her head, and her yellow hair was neatly plaited into two braids with bright green candy straw bows tied at the ends. "Well, look at those braids, will you? Even a child smaller than me has decent hair. These red curls can never be braided or fixed cute like that." Taffyette's bonbon eyes seemed to grow larger as she stared at Ginger, and for a moment Aunt Taffy seemed lost for words at Ginger's outburst. Then Aunt Taffy explained to Ginger, "Happiness is a choice. It comes from within, and you won't find it anywhere else. Certainly not in braided hair. You'll figure that out with time, little Ginger, or not. It's all up to you. Now, enough of this. Let's get to our dressmaking project." She ended the subject and rolled the wheelbarrow into Ginger's kitchen, where she began placing the contents on the table. Taffyette was busy helping her mother with a happy smile. Ginger watched the two of them working together, then managed to choke out the words, "I'm sorry." For a moment Aunt Taffy looked puzzled, then she realized what Ginger's apology was for. She smiled. "It's over and done with, dear. Let's get on with the task at hand. Have you found your sugar is sweet, let's keep them neat dress stacker?" Ginger shook her head. No, she had not. And Aunt Taffy instructed, "Well, look behind that door in your pantry back in the corner. I'm guessing it's probably there." Ginger found it exactly there, a tall contraption made of hard rock crystal candy. It had four wheels so it could be easily rolled, and four stacking shelves. She carefully rolled it into the kitchen. "Ah, yes, you found it. Once we make your dresses, we place them on the shelves, then take them outside to dry on your stacker. It was Rooty who invented it. You met him at your banquet. We find them most useful, and we all have one." Ginger soon found herself caught up in the fun as Aunt Taffy held the pressed gingerbread pieces up to Ginger to get a measurement, then cut them with sharp scissors made of hard rock candy. Aunt Taffy taught her how to make the frosting that glued the pieces together, and how to mix special colored decorative icing for creating patterns on the dress. When Ginger produced the cinnamon candies, Aunt Taffy beamed at her. "Those are exactly what this dress needs. You have an eye for fashion already. Pink and white and red," Ginger declared, very pleased with herself. "Those are the only colors I want on this dress." With that, she proceeded to put the dress together just as she had been instructed. The red candies were glued with dabs of pink frosting in a double row down the front of the new dress. Along the scalloped white icing at the hem, Ginger patterned more candies, placing them just right. When she was finished, she stood back to survey the results, then frowned. "It doesn't look the way I wanted it to. It's not right at all." Taffyette stopped her clapping, and Aunt Taffy's smile grew smaller. "Well, darling, it looks wonderful to me. I've seen many newly born girls make their first dress, and you, Ginger dear, have succeeded as well as any of them." "Yeah, right," Ginger snapped. Then, noting their expressions, she softened her voice and told them, "Well, maybe I'll get better with time. Besides, it's better than this shift I've been wearing." "Yes, dear, you most certainly will get better each time. That's how it works, Aunt Taffy soothed. Let's put together one more dress with what's left. What colors would you like for this one? Ginger chose green and yellow frostings because she had noticed that Taffyette and Aunt Taffy looked so well in those colors. Soon the two new dresses were finished and out on the stacker to dry in the sun. With a satisfied smile, Aunt Taffy loaded Taffyette into her wheelbarrow and rolled it out the gate. Ginger, remember tomorrow morning you're scheduled to work at the Sugartown Material Mart. I'm sure you remember. It's a large building I showed you where we create the sweet fabrics for our clothes. You will learn a great deal working there and can bring some new materials home with you for your next clothing project. You're on your own now, but you are welcome to call on me any time you feel you need help. Also, when you go to town, be sure you take your wheelbarrow. You will find it is always handy to have. Taffyette had a mouthful of hard candies she had gathered from the ground. With a colorful smile, she waved a sticky hand at Ginger as she and her mother disappeared up the path leading back to Sugartown. Chapter 9. Life goes on even when you are little. Good morning, little Ginger, called Coco, who was wheeling her barrow out her gate as Ginger came up the path. Are you on your way to town? Okay, here we go again with the little business. These people don't give it a rest, Ginger muttered. As she got closer, she responded, Yes, I am. I was reminded yesterday that I'm to report to work at the Material Mart this morning. Me too, laughed Coco happily. We can go together. I love your dress. It's perfect for a little ginger girl like you. The color is marvelous with your red curls. Gritting her raisin teeth, Ginger willed herself not to snap at Coco for the remarks about her size. Well, I like yours too. What is it made of? Thanks. Aunt Taffy chose this for me. It's pressed pumpkin cake, she declared, even as she whirled for Ginger to get the full effect of her first dress creation. The orangey cake material went well with Coco's rich brownie body. The dress was decorated with thick white and orange frosting stripes and was belted at the waist with a crocheted band of lemon and orange sour grasses. Coco had upped her pink hair into a bouffant bun, held in place with two thin candy sticks. Altogether, the effect was quite becoming, and Ginger found a little knot of unhappiness forming in her stomach. Until that moment, she had been very pleased with the day and her new dress. In a flash, that had disappeared. Why didn't I think of thick stripes like that? The pumpkin cake would look just as good on me with my gingerbread body. No, Aunt Taffy brings Coco the pumpkin cake, and I get the pressed gingerbread. Well, it's no wonder, considering I'm the little one, so I just get what's left over. Ginger found herself kicking at the colorful candy in the path as her mind broiled in unhappy thoughts. Coco, who was ahead on the path, at last turned. I'm going too fast for you, aren't I? I forget how small you are. I'll slow down. Coco's kindness was instantly taken as an insult in Ginger's unhappy mind, and she curtly snapped back. I'm keeping up just fine. You don't need to slow down for me. Well, okay then, Coco responded, and up the path the two of them went as Ginger's little legs moved in double time. Ginger found herself quite out of breath and out of sorts when the two of them rolled their wheelbarrows up to the Material Mart, a large building built of red and white striped logs from the variegated forest. They found stalls to park their wheelbarrows and went to the building's shiny yellow door. It was immediately opened by a tall fellow made of devil's food cake, wearing a thin pancake apron and a jaunty matching hat. He introduced himself as Dandy. His eyes were red lozenges, he had a triangular white marshmallow nose, his lips were burnt sugar candy, and his teeth were red candy chips. "Pleased to meet you both," he assured the girls. "Let me take you on a tour and introduce you to our head honcho here. Her name's Marva." The girls followed him into the spacious building filled with vats and pipes and machinery, with cogs and wheels, contraptions that were humming, and busy people working here and there, all involved in the jobs assigned to them. "These are the presses," Dandy indicated with a smile. "That side houses the ovens, and once we've baked our day's goods, we bring them here to press them into fine material for making our clothes. Today it's white cake material we're making. Yesterday we made some fine batches of yellow cake material, as we've been a little low on those two items lately." Dandy continued his tour of the material mart. "Here are our storage bins for the white sugar we cart in from the sugar pits west of Popcorn Mountain. Around this corner we have the ladies, who are our finest lace makers," he told them, indicating a group of 6 women who were creating lacy spun sugar on large looms as they chatted amongst themselves. Ginger and Coco were happy to recognize Aunt Taffy as one of the lace makers. Aunt Taffy noticed them and left her loom to affectionately greet them. Dandy then took them to the loading dock, where they saw a large woman who was directing the workers. She was made of red velvet cake with red hair of finely spun strands of sugar. Her blue candy eyes were set perfectly over a butter toffee nose, and she had lips of thick white icing with thinner white icing forming eyebrows. Her smile showed teeth of neatly arranged white chocolate pieces. She was wearing overalls of pressed strawberry cake over a long-sleeved shirt of pressed pound cake. "This is Marva. She runs the place," explained Dandy. Just then Marva turned and noticed them. Giving one final order, she leapt from the dock and warmly welcomed the 2 girls. "You'll find your place soon enough, as we all have our talents. Dandy will get you started. Just follow his directions." Soon Ginger and Coco were working side by side in a large garden in back of the material mart. Along with others who showed them just what to do, they were harvesting candied cherries, maraschino cherries, glazed blueberries, and glazed strawberries from the bushes that produced them. After a tasty lunch in the factory's cafeteria, Dandy took them to the packaging room, where they were given the job of placing the harvest into boxes. At the end of the afternoon, Ginger and Coco were both given their choice of materials for their next clothing creations, and the 2 girls rolled their wheelbarrows home more slowly, tired but happy. Thus they began to find their place in the land of sweetness, and the days slipped away in a steady stream of learning, working, and discovery. Even at that, little Ginger found her enjoyment constantly evaporating at any moment, most especially when she would think of how tiny she was in comparison to all the other people in the land, except for Taffyette. However, that thought gave her no comfort at all. Chapter 10: The Unveiling of a Masterpiece, and More. Ginger's eyes opened in excitement. It was the 11th of Sugarary, the day she was going to Sugartown for the unveiling of Cubey Big's curiously cold and creamy creation. Slipping from her bed, she put it into order, fluffing the pillows just right. "I'm glad I changed my mind and decided to go," Ginger admitted to herself. "Why stay home and miss it and then have to hear all about it from everyone else? It really was a bad idea to not go, even though I'll be the smallest one there except for Taffyette. A little frown formed at this thought, imagining herself so lost behind the crowd of creations that she would not be able to see the new invention anyway. I will be like a little nothing in the background of all those normal sized creations, like I always am. Shaking her head, she went out the door to find some breakfast, harvesting a perfectly ripe blackberry pie. Placing the pie on the fence, she knelt under the tree as she noticed her chocolate melt in your mouth mint patch was gleaming with fresh mints. Picking several dark chocolate and a few milk chocolate mints, she then took her breakfast inside. Soon she was dressed and on her way up the path so she would be at Coco's home right on time. As Ginger approached, Coco came flying down the path to meet her. Can you believe the day is finally here for us to see the mysterious taste treat? It seems to have taken forever, but it's only been 2 months since Cube Big made his announcement. Then, looking at the new dress Ginger had made for the occasion, Coco declared, Little Ginger, I love your dress. It's very cute. Thanks, Coco. I knew the pressed pumpkin cake would look good with my gingerbread body, and I liked your stripes so much I wanted some for myself. You were right. It goes very well with you. The red stripes are perfect with your hair, and the blue ones set off your eyes. Very clever. Coco's pink hair was tied with bows of hot pink candy straws. Her dress was pressed strawberry cake covered with dots and hot pink icing. Dots! Why didn't I think of dots? It's because I'm smaller than them all, so I have less brains. Not only am I smaller, I can't make my hair go into braids or ponytails. It's not fair at all. Even with these thoughts, Ginger managed a return compliment for Coco, and the two girls went on their way to Sugartown as other creations joined them on their way to the grand event. When they arrived in the palace courtyard, they found a buzz of excitement in the happy throng of creations. The Cookie Queen, Cube Big, and an assortment of other leaders were sitting on a raised platform, with the Queen's tall chocolate soldiers standing at attention in the front. Soon enough, the soldiers trumpeted on their candy horns. The audience quieted. The Queen welcomed her subjects to the gala occasion, and Cube Big came to the center. With a short speech and a twinkle in his eye, Cube Big announced, Behold, our newest taste treat, my curiously cold and creamy creation. As he said this, the soldiers removed the partitions surrounding the invention to reveal a breathtaking, low-growing tree covered with blossoms in 6 different shades. Each colored blossom had a remarkably shiny sheen. The soft brown triangular leaves were gently rounded at their wide tops. Cube Big explained they were made of a supple waffle crust edged in dark chocolate. Ginger had managed to slip her way through the crowd, so she had a front row view of Cube Big, who had now descended from the dais to the tree. Now I shall give you a demonstration of how to eat the treat, Cube Big announced as he plucked one of the delicate leaves from the tree. Gently, he rolled the leaf into a cone shape and held it high for everyone to see. Next, you decide what creamy and cold flavor you would like to taste. As you can see, there are 6 flavors, and each flavor is represented by the color of the blossom. You will find vanilla, chocolate, strawberry, nutty nut, very blueberry, and parfait surprise, he announced, pointing to each colored blossom as he named their flavor. I'm going to choose Very Blueberry." With that, he held the waffle cone under a blue blossom. The blossom's shining head drooped and fell over the cone. Then the blossom gently unfurled and deposited a heaping mound of icy blue dessert into the cone. The townspeople gasped in amazement. "That's all there is to it," Cube Big announced with a grin as he carried the cone to the dais and presented it to the Cookie Queen. "No candy spoon needed to eat this one, Your Majesty. You eat it right from the cone, good to the last bite." The queen took a dainty bite, and then another and another, her pecan eyes seeming to grow larger with each bite. "Cube Big, you've outdone yourself. This is truly spectacular," the queen pronounced. The audience cheered, and Cube Big and the soldiers began assisting the citizens to each make their own chosen cone. The courtyard was soon filled with oohs and ahs, as the people had never tasted anything remotely similar to the wonderful treat they were experiencing. Ginger was about to slink into the background when Coco came through the crowd bearing 2 cones of white dessert, one for herself and one for Ginger. Ginger thanked Coco, then took a small bite of the cold creation. "Curiously cold is right. This is colder than the Lemonade River by far," Ginger exclaimed, then took another bite. "Oh, this is wonderful." Coco was in complete agreement, and the 2 girls finished their treats to the last tender tip of the delectable cone. "That was unbelievably superb. I see why they call him a genius," Coco declared. "Oh, look, there's Dandy. See you later, Ginger. I've got to talk to him about my shift at the Material Mart." Ginger sat alone watching others as they enjoyed their treat. "The strawberry from the red blossom looks so good. Why did Coco have to bring me plain old vanilla? Why not the very blueberry like the queen had, or even the nutty nut? I guess she thinks a little thing like me should only have plain vanilla." Just then a shadow passed over Ginger, and a voice questioned, "Well, who do we have here? What is your name, little one?" "Here we go again with the little business," Ginger groaned to herself. Then she looked up to respond to the question and found herself gazing wide-eyed into the brown eyes of the Cookie Queen. Ginger managed to stammer with a bitter voice, "Everyone calls me poor little Ginger because I'm so little and not of much consequence." At that statement, the Cookie Queen knelt down, looked directly into Ginger's blue eyes, and remarked, "Don't you know, my little subject? We are all the same. What do you think it takes to make batter? You may have a few more spices, but the main ingredients are all the same. We are all one. Your size does not matter, but it does matter what you think. You are what you say you are. Always remember that." Ginger gazed into the queen's eyes as her mind absorbed the wise words. A lightness came creeping into her heart, and she returned the queen's smile. Then she murmured, "Yes, Your Majesty, I will always remember." The queen gently patted Ginger's cheek as she told her, "I believe you will, my dear. Yes, I certainly do believe you will. Now you have a good time and enjoy your day." The queen arose and continued through the courtyard, visiting with her subjects. Ginger sat in dazed silence, trying to comprehend the sudden and huge shift she was feeling. Then she laughed out loud as she said in wonderment, "I might be little Ginger, but there's nothing poor about me at all." Chapter 11. What a change perception can make. Time flew on happy wings after the Cookie Queen's words of wisdom to her tiny subject. Ginger had soaked them in like a cookie dipped in lemonade. It was a beautiful new day, and Ginger pushed her wheelbarrow towards Sugartown. Coco once again spotted Ginger as she approached and hurried down the path to meet her. Wow! Look at those colors! Ginger felt a glow at the compliment, even as Coco admired her, circling around her, exclaiming with admiration at the psychedelic pattern Ginger had created on white pressed cake, with a rainbow of glowing icing colors she'd artistically put together. "I've never seen anything like it," remarked Coco. "Truly, I haven't. Every time I see you're wearing a new dress, you've come up with another amazing pattern. How do you manage that?" "It seems the ideas just keep coming," laughed Ginger. "They seem to have moved in with my choice to be happy, and to me it's so much fun. Do do you think you could design something special for me?" questioned Coco. "Well, sure, Coco. I'm glad you asked because I already have an idea that would be fabulous for you." "You do? Tell me." Ginger laughed. "You're going to have to wait, Coco. Give me at least a week. I'm still working on the design for Cube Big's dress shirt. That has first priority." Coco nodded, then said, "You've really come into your own, Ginger. Your designs are so unique. I can't wait to see what you have in mind for me. Oh, what's the cake for in your wheelbarrow?" "I picked this coconut supreme cake this morning. You know they're Aunt Taffy's favorite, so I thought we could pass by her house and take it to her before we go into town. Is that okay with you?" "Of course it's fine with me. It's lovely to have such a perfect day to do as we wish." "And these are for you, Coco. You can leave them in your house." Ginger handed Coco a thin-shelled candy box filled with tiny twigs of many flavors from the variegated forest, which she had snapped off the trees that morning. "Oh, Ginger, thank you!" exclaimed Coco, choosing a black and white striped twig. "Licorice, my favorite." "Well, maybe not. I know I say that about every one of them," she laughed. "You were the sweetest friend a girl could have." Soon they were headed up the path to town when Ginger stopped her wheelbarrow. "Coco, there are some great sourball bushes just off the path here. I've been wanting some for decorations. Please wait, it won't take me long." Ginger grabbed a small basket she'd woven of grape taffy and disappeared off the path until she reached the well-laden bushes and began gathering an assortment of the brightly colored balls. "It would be nice to have a few of these growing in my yard," she thought. "I'll have to check at the grocery for some startings." At that moment Ginger froze as a very strange feeling came over her. Turning slowly, her eyes searched the little hill, for she felt she was being watched by something unknown and unfriendly as well. Seeing nothing out of the ordinary, she shook her head and made her way back to Coco on the path. "Oh, you got plenty." "Yes, there's a nice nest of them down that hill, and the colors are perfect." Still, the uncomfortable feeling she'd experienced lay at the back of her mind, and even amidst their chatty conversation she would feel little stabs of something most discomfiting. Arriving at Aunt Taffy's helped the feeling go away because of how happy Aunt Taffy was at Ginger's thoughtful gift. "Well, I never!" Aunt Taffy exclaimed. Ginger, how you knew to bring me this is beyond me. Why, just this morning I was out searching my cake tree, hoping to find a bud of one coming on, but there were no coconut cakes to be found. I've been craving one for weeks. Come in, sit down, and we'll all have a slice of this wonderful cake. We want the cake to be for you and Taffyette. Besides, we're on our way to try our last flavor of the cold and creamy creation. You could come with us if you want and save the cake for later. Yes, Mommy. Oh, please. Yes. Taffyette was hopping up and down as she begged her mother, to which Aunt Taffy merrily agreed. Soon the four of them were in the Queen's courtyard, each enjoying a cone. Ginger had purposely saved the parfait surprise flavor for last, and found herself savoring each delectable, cold and creamy bite. I see what you mean, Coco. There's chocolate, banana, pineapple, vanilla wafers, and strawberries all mixed in this. Every bite is perfect. How's your very blueberry? It's great, laughed Coco. Tangy and smooth and sweet all at once. Delicious. Little Taffyette and her mother had both admired Ginger's new dress, and now Aunt Taffy thoughtfully inquired of Ginger, "What happened that has made such a change in you, Ginger? Not that you weren't a sweet little thing all along, but these past few months you've changed so much you hardly seem to be the same little Ginger you used to be." Ginger, who had been playing tag with Taffyette, threw herself onto the rock crystal candy bench beside Aunt Taffy and grinned. Let's say I had a simple change in perception, for that's it in a candy shell. Perception? Questioned Aunt Taffy. Yes, ma'am. It was something the Cookie Queen said to me personally right here in this courtyard. She told me that I am what I say I am. Right at that moment, I knew what she was saying was as right as cloud candy. I thought about it all that day and all night too, and decided I only want to be happy. And it's only up to me. I'm the one who says so. I've been oh so happy ever since. Well, it shows, you remarkable girl. You might call it a simple change in perception, but to change as you have, Ginger, is huge, simply huge. And you did it just like that. Yep, I did, agreed Ginger with a grin. I love everything about my life now, from my red curls to my petite size. I find myself perfect just as I am. Mommy always told you so, piped in Taffyette. Yes, she did, responded Ginger. And she was oh so right, Taffyette. But to know it for myself, that makes all the difference. Chapter 12. Shadow of a Dark Cloud. It's so smart of you to have your wheelbarrow along, Ginger. I must remember to always take mine when I go into town from now on, as we never know what we might decide to do. Who knew we would end up at the growery and find these wonderful new plants? The two girls had just arrived back at Coco's home, where they unloaded Coco's startings from Ginger's wheelbarrow. Coco was happy to have found a plenteous pudding shrub and a cozy custard bush for her yard. In a matter of time, each plant would produce varieties of puddings and custards, which grew in thin-shelled candy cups with spoon-shaped leaflets for eating, leaves made of the same thin-shelled candy. Ginger was also well pleased with the very sweet roll bush she had found for her little home. She had been checking for one at the grocery ever since she had eaten a gooey cream cheese roll from one in Aunt Taffy's yard. Bidding Coco a fond goodbye, Ginger hastened down the path, humming a little tune. Arriving at her home, she fetched the apron she had woven from pressed caramel strips and covered her colorful dress. By the time she had spaded the rich brown sugar soil and transplanted her new plant, the sun was setting. "A good day's work," she commented to herself as she gazed with satisfaction at her yard. "Now for some dinner. I think I'll have the last slice of my orange cream pie. That sounds good." With that thought in mind, she rolled her wheelbarrow to the shed in her backyard, where she parked it neatly in its place and put her gardening tools on the shelf. She shut the shed door and knelt to examine the ginger snap patch. She found one perfect cookie which she picked, noting 6 more almost ready. As she crunched on the spicy cookie, Ginger went to the far side of the shed to check the patch of candied nuts and maple creams. It was at that moment an ominous shadow seemed to move in the distance on the edge of the variegated forest. The unpleasant feeling from earlier that day caught at Ginger once again. She stood stock still for many minutes and stared into the gloom of the forest, but nothing moved again. Finally, she shook her head, trying to shake away the awful feeling. At last she went into her home and ate her dinner, still quite upset. At last she exclaimed, "Whatever this feeling is, I gravely and greatly don't like it." But still it hovered like a dark cloud, even slipping into her dreams that night. Chapter 13. Stranger and Stranger. What a night, Ginger thought as she woke to recall the peculiar feeling she'd experienced. Finally, she shook herself, deciding, "No use dwelling on it. It's a new day, and I have better things to think of and do. Number one on my list today is to finish Cube Big's fine dress shirt." This thought brought an instant smile as she remembered the day the very tall Butterbrickle had admired the dress Ginger was wearing, which was decorated with beautiful swirls and radiant colors. "That's one remarkable dress," he had exclaimed, obviously impressed. Ginger had thanked him for his compliment, extremely pleased to be noticed by the tall inventor. "I guess I ought to spend more time making myself something more out of the ordinary," remarked Cubey Big. "I get so caught up in my next invention I seem to end up wearing the same old thing over and over." The great inventor was very pleased at Ginger's sincere offer to design a shirt just for him, and she insisted it would be her pleasure. It had been an extraordinary day, for he had taken her up on her kind offer right then. Together they went to Cubey Big's home, and soon the two of them were sitting at Cubey Big's kitchen table, each eating a delicious piece of cheesecake as they visited. When she passed by Coco's house on her way home that day, Ginger had laughed at how excited Coco was when she noticed the 3 large shirts belonging to Cubey Big in Ginger's wheelbarrow. "I'm taking them home with me to give them new life," Ginger explained to Coco. "I can make them look like totally new shirts. They're perfectly good. They just need some jazzing up. That's all." That week Ginger had worked long and hard and managed to decorate and return 2 of the shirts to Cubey Big, who was very pleased and impressed with their artistic and colorful designs. He had declared them as not recognizable as the shirts he had sent home with her, which was exactly what Ginger had intended. Ginger explained that the 3rd shirt was taking longer and would be delivered later. It was a shirt made of fine spun sugar, a dress shirt for special occasions. Ginger's artistic sense knew decorative icing would not do for this special shirt. She had mulled over different ideas for it, And her solution came the day she was harvesting sugar crystals at the Material Mart. As she gazed at their shimmering facets, she knew what she would do. She had spent days gluing them onto the shirt with clear sugar icing, making wide stripes of the perfectly placed sparkling crystals. I'm finishing Big's dress shirt today. With this exciting thought, she hurried out the door to check on her plants, which was her usual morning routine. She harvested 6 ginger snaps and a 3-layer red velvet cake. I'll take half of this to Coco on my way to town, she remarked, as she quite enjoyed talking to her little self. Then, examining her perfect pie tree, she discovered a pie ready to harvest also. And I'll take her half of this fresh peach pie. She and I have a great variety to eat, sharing the way we do. Once her harvest had been put away and Ginger had eaten breakfast, she went to work on Big's shirt, patiently gluing each crystal into place. 2 hours later, she placed the last crystal onto the shirt, then stood back and declared, "It's wonderfully beautiful. My, oh my." Carefully arranging the shirt on her dress stacker, she rolled it out the door for the shirt to dry and harden in the smiling sun. Outside, it was even more impressive, causing her to clap her hands in delighted satisfaction. Well, that's a job well done. This has to dry a few hours before I take it to Big, so I have time to start on my yellow lemon cake dress before lunch. First, though, I think I'll refill my empty candy jar with variegated twigs." She fetched her candy jar and went into the forest. She snapped tiny twigs within her reach and filled the jar full with many flavors. Just as she placed a handful of striped cherry-flavored twigs into her jar, she froze, and a deep feeling of foreboding took her breath away. She backed into the shadow of a cinnamon mint tree while her eyes searched the forest. Then she heard a crackling sound and realized there was someone or something else in the forest besides herself. She edged around the striped tree and saw a very strange being heading deeper into the forest. This being was different than anyone Ginger had ever seen, but it was the way he was sneaking into the forest that affected her most. He was wearing a black hat pulled low over his ears, and his black cloak was hugged tightly to his body and lower face. He was furtive and skulking and looked as though he was hiding some very bad secret. A shudder went right up Ginger's little back. She didn't hesitate. Small or not, it was up to her to discover what someone so sneaky and strange was doing in the land of sweetness. Quietly, she placed her jar on the forest floor and set off on the trail of the stranger creeping into the forest. She had to discover what the mysterious man was up to. At last, Ginger saw a flicker of light coming from a grove of peppermint trees. Cautiously, she tiptoed in the light's direction, hardly daring to breathe. Quite frightened, she peered around a striped wintergreen tree to spy on the curious being. He had built a small fire on the forest floor, and his black bag lay agape on the ground like an evil open mouth. As she viewed him closer, he appeared even odder to Ginger, like no one she had ever met before. His hat was lying on the ground, and she could see he had a shock of tiny, stringy things wildly decorating the top of his head. His eyes were glinting blue with a fierce light in them, but they were recessed in his head, not brightly placed on the outside like Ginger's gumdrop blue eyes. Very weird indeed. As Ginger watched, the peculiar man was carrying a bottle filled with something black, hopping in a circle around the fire, chanting the strangest words. Iracioso, changioso, rapidicious. 3 times he repeated the queer words. Then he abruptly lurched to a halt and tossed black powder from the bottle into the fire. When the powder hit the flames, black smoke boiled from the fire and rolled out, covering the floor of the forest with dark, smoky fingers. The strange man could no longer be spotted because of the thick, choking smoke. Ginger turned and ran as fast as her little legs would carry her. As rapidly as she raced, the smoke billowed after her as it rolled and fanned over the land of sweetness. Quickly, the smoke overtook Ginger and she gasped for air. Ginger's throat was burning, and as she ran, she snatched a hard rock candy from the ground and popped it into her mouth to soothe her panting throat. It almost broke a raisin tooth right out of her head. Stunned, Ginger spit it into her hand, and what she saw was not a piece of sweet rock candy at all. It had a nasty taste, no sweetness to it whatsoever. It was a hard, plain little gray thing like nothing Ginger had ever seen before. When the choking black smoke cleared away, Ginger found that everything in the land of sweetness was nothing like she'd ever seen before. It was not the land of sweetness anymore. Everything was awful and very different. Chapter 14. Grim Changes. Ginger raced as fast as she could until she breathlessly arrived at the palace of the Cookie Queen. In the courtyard, she found many creations who were upset at the changes in their land. Ginger was quickly taken into the Cookie Queen's throne room. Once she told the queen what she had seen, the queen sent a troop of her finest chocolate soldiers to search for the stranger and had Ginger lead the way. She carefully led the soldiers back into the variegated forest. They combed the forest, but the stranger had disappeared along with the evil black smoke he had created. The only thing they found was a barren, depressing forest with trees that were scraggly and dull in color. The sweet scent of the forest was gone. It was dreadful. The soldiers and Ginger returned to the palace, exhausted and forlorn. Sorrowfully, Ginger described every detail of what she had witnessed to the queen. At the end of Ginger's story, the queen sat in silence. At last she spoke. "It has been ages since anyone has crossed over. It has been so long we believed they would never come again. We thought there were no more of our Creator's offspring left. Only they were given the power to come here. Our Creator came from another dimension of life, my dear, and made our land purely out of love. For some reason, this ancestor of our Creator has turned our land into the kind of land he came from. I cannot conceive why he would do such a thing. In the past, when anyone came from the world, it was a joyful visit. Nothing like this." Ginger gasped at this statement, and the queen smiled. "All royalty of this land know many things our creations do not need to know. There is a way to cross over, and the man you saw has somehow discovered very old knowledge, but is not using it for good. He does not understand the power by which this land was made. He is very lost indeed." The queen stood and addressed her subjects who were crowded into the throne room. "My dear people, I do not know why our land has been changed, but it creates a very serious situation for us. We must all be on the lookout for the stranger that has made this grim change. In the meantime, we must eat what remains in our kitchens carefully. Be frugal, dear subjects, share with your neighbors, and we shall see what comes next. I will do the best for you that I can. Now go to your homes. There is nothing more that can be accomplished here." As the people departed, Cube Big, Gerard, and Rudy entered the throne room with their report. Gerard addressed the Queen. "Your Majesty, everything has been changed. Nothing is as it was before." "Sadly, that is as I suspected," she responded. "The question is why? And I fear the answer is not a pleasant one." The Queen related to the men all that Ginger had seen and described the strange man in detail. Once the Queen had finished her explanation, she turned to Ginger and asked, "Would you prefer to stay here in the palace, my dear? Or would you rather go home?" When Ginger heard this question, she gravely understood just how serious the situation was. With a shake of her head, she managed to smile and responded, "I'm going to my own little home, Your Majesty. I'll be fine, just fine." She gave a little curtsy to the Cookie Queen, turned and bowed to the three men and soldiers, and resolutely walked out the palace doors. Chapter 15. There's always a silver lining. Everything was quiet as Ginger entered the deserted courtyard. When Ginger passed what was once Cube Big's cold and creamy creation, she saw the leaves were now an unusual shade of green. She plucked one and took a tiny nibble. It was not good. She spit it into her hand, then brushed it onto the ground. She noticed the dirt was no longer a rich brown color, but softer, as though it might be very pale milk chocolate. She took a pinch and tasted it. Immediately she spit that out too. The taste was awful. The farther she walked, the more she realized the seriousness of the dilemma facing the people in the land of sweetness, as there was nothing edible growing any more. As she went down the path toward home, Coco came running to meet her. "I've been watching for you. I waited quite a while after the Queen's announcement, but then decided to come home. I fixed dinner and waited so we could eat together. Come in and sit down. You look quite tired." There were two candy plates set on the table. Both had a slice of marble cake with rich chocolate icing, and there were cups of sweet lemonade. "This will have to do for our dinner," Coco explained. "As the Cookie Queen said, we should cut back." "This is perfect," remarked Ginger, and the two girls ate in companionable silence as they savored each bite. "I don't think there's any lemonade left in the river. I wonder what will come through our candy pipes once they are emptied of the lemonade in them. Do you want to go exploring tomorrow and find out for ourselves?" questioned Coco. "Every plant in my yard has nothing to eat on it. My pudding and custard bushes look like they shrunk. They're just tiny with green leaves. It's very strange indeed. Why would anyone change our land? I don't get it at all." Ginger laughed then, in spite of the occurrence of that day. "You're laughing?" questioned Coco in surprise. "Well, why not? What's our option? Why stay sad? It won't make anything better. I'm laughing because of your questions, so yes, I'd like to go with you exploring tomorrow. We can look for the stranger. The Cookie Queen is wondering the same thing, why anyone would change our land. She's afraid the reason behind it isn't a nice one, but I guess anyone can figure that out." "It's very serious, though, isn't it, Ginger?" Coco responded. "Yes, it is very serious, but I think we can get by a long time. Our homes are made of edible materials. Everything we harvested is still good food. We can even eat our plates and cups if it comes down to it. But if it's not changed back, the day will come when we'll be to the end of it all. At Coco's look of fear, Ginger smiled a little smile. I think the day inevitably comes when we come to the end of it all, Coco. You know how we come and go. But to have nothing to eat, what about that? Cried Coco. We still have plenty, just not a great variety. Then Ginger managed with a grin. At least you still have your favorite. Look at this table. Then Coco began to laugh because her trestle table was made of black and white striped logs from a licorice tree. The little cabin was filled with peals of laughter as they began to lick the dark, sweet flavor of the tabletop. Chapter 16. Here's to Friendship. When she awoke the next morning, it took Ginger a few moments to remember the events of the day before. I have never been as tired as I was last night. What a day yesterday was! But today's a new day. She lovingly made her bed, then ate the last piece of her red cherry pie. She checked the stock of food in her cupboards and was happy to see the red velvet cake and peach pie she had harvested the day before. At that moment she remembered Cube Big's shirt, which was still outside on her dress stacker. She hurried out her door and found the shirt was where she'd left it, waiting to be taken to its owner. As she lifted it, Ginger was pleased with the dazzling effect of the rock crystals on the shirt. I hope he gets to wear you before he has to eat you, she addressed the shirt. She carefully folded it and took it safely into her home. Then she went back outside to look around her little yard. All the fences were still made of striped candy, but the plants they surrounded were now little shrubs with tough brown stems and dark green leaves of different shapes and sizes. Very strange indeed, remarked Ginger as she examined her cake and pie trees. Next, she went into the variegated forest. The forest was no longer brightly colored, and the sweet scent was gone. Some of the brown tree trunks were very rough and bumpy, others smoother. She kept watch for the stranger, but, like yesterday, he was nowhere to be found. As she was returning home, she found her candy jar of striped twigs on the forest floor, right where she had placed it the day before. Happily, she picked up the jar and went back to her home. Then she loaded her wheelbarrow and rolled it up the path to Coco's home. It wasn't long before she found her friend coming down the path towards her. I couldn't wait any longer. I decided to come get you, Coco announced, then gave Ginger a big hug. Oh, Ginger, how are we going to manage? There's nothing to do, no plants to tend, nothing to harvest. I'm trying my best to be happy, but this is not what I call fun, Ginger. I know, replied Ginger soberly. Our land is not the same anymore, and we are going to have to change what we do, but for now we are together, the best of friends. We will manage. Somehow we will. Look, I brought you some striped candy, peach pie, red velvet cake, and chocolate mints. Coco looked into the wheelbarrow and shook her head. You are the sweetest friend a girl could have, Ginger. Best friends is right. Guess what I have for you? Come see. The two girls carried the goods into the house, where Coco indicated a colorful basket of plaited sour straws that contained half a pineapple upside-down cake, a slice of pumpkin pie, and half a lemon dazzle cake. Ginger laughed in delight. I'm no sweeter of a friend than you are, Coco. We're lucky to have each other. Gerard sure knew what he was doing when he created the two of us the same day. It was meant to be. They packed a lunch basket and set out to explore their changed world. The first item on their list was to taste the Lemonade River. Chapter 17. Something new to do. Well, look at that, Coco exclaimed as they stood on the bank of the Lemonade River. It's still flowing, but it looks like plain sugar water, no color at all. Ginger placed the lunch basket on the ground, took a cup and dipped it full of the clear liquid. As she took a careful sip, she observed, "It doesn't have much of a taste at all. It seems faintly sweet, and that might be from the candy cup itself. Here, Coco, you try it." "You're right. It doesn't taste like anything. For sure, it's not sweet sugar water, but it is wet. At least it's not awful like the soil." "Even the yellow lemon rocks are gone that made the stream bed," marveled Ginger as she gazed at the dark rocks at the bottom of the stream. "All the grasses are green, and I've already tried them. Their taste is rather like the taste of the green leaves. Not good at all." "Not good is right. Why would anyone change our land to something so drab?" questioned Coco mournfully. "I don't know, Coco, but the man who did this must have a reason that makes sense to him, even though it makes no sense to us." The girls continued with their exploration and met others on their outing. Everyone was bewildered by their new surroundings. When they arrived at the white sugar pits on the far side of Popcorn Mountain, it appeared the white sugar had survived. It didn't take long to realize that was not the case. The grains were gritty with a sharp, shocking taste that did not dissolve into sweetness in their mouths. "Awful!" both girls exclaimed at once. "Well, that's it in a candy shell. There's nothing left of the land of sweetness that we knew," sorrowfully remarked Coco as she gazed at the brown soil path winding its way up Popcorn Mountain. "No caramel path, no popcorn, and I guarantee no pool of melted butter. I don't want to go to the top, Ginger. If it's all right with you, let's go back to the river and eat our lunch there, okay?" "Sure, Coco, that's a better idea than eating here. It all looks so forlorn and bare. At least the green grass is soft, and we can sit in the shade of the oldest toffee tree." With this declaration, Ginger led the way upstream. "It's still a remarkable tree," Ginger remarked as they approached. "The largest and oldest tree in the land of sweetness." They stopped to admire the gigantic tree which had once produced sweet toffees. As they drew closer, Coco exclaimed, "Ginger, look!" Scattered on the ground were a profusion of toffees. Laughing, the girls rushed to the tree and gathered a handful of the delicious candies. After lunch, they each ate a single toffee and savored it until the last sweet morsel was gone. They laid on their backs and gazed at the rustling green leaves that now adorned the tree. Ginger remarked, "Look how beautiful the green and the blue of the sky are together. At least the tree is still with us, even if it doesn't grow toffees anymore." Once they had rested, Coco commented, "We are so lucky that these toffees fell off the tree and didn't change with the rest of the land." Ginger agreed, and they filled their basket with toffees and headed toward Sugartown. They were greeted by Ruti at the palace courtyard. "We found these today and want the queen to have them for anyone in need," Coco announced. The large man smiled and kindly thanked the two girls. He poured the toffees into a nearby box and left a few in the basket for them. "We've kept a lookout for the stranger, but we haven't seen any sign of him," Ginger informed Rudy. "Good for you, girls. I know you will both keep doing your best. We are looking for him, and we won't give up hope." The girls bid Ruti goodbye and left the palace, homeward bound, both well pleased with themselves. "Coco, come with me. This is the part of the path where the sour balls grew. Let's see what we can find." They went down the hill and found many of the bright and tangy sour balls scattered on the ground under the bushes, and they gathered their basket full again. Well, this has been a surprising day, I'd say, Coco exclaimed. Who ever thought we would have such fun after the calamity that hit us yesterday? Yes, Ginger laughed. Obviously, we have the power to find peace in any situation. It just depends on us. Now we have something to keep us busy, Coco. Let's both take our baskets and go out looking for whatever food we can find. How do you feel about coming to my house in the morning? We'll have breakfast together, and then we'll begin our search in the variegated forest to see what lies on the forest floor that is still good to eat. You notice? We keep finding what we're looking for. I love your idea. It's as sweet as a lemonade river used to be. I'll come to your house bright and early tomorrow morning. The friends hugged goodbye, and Ginger returned home. Chapter 18. Plans don't always go as planned. Weeks later, Ginger stretched and rolled over in her bed. The room was dusky as the sun's first weak rays filtered in. Good morning, morning, Ginger said as she slipped from her bed, donning her plain pressed spice cake dress, the one Cubebig had admired so long ago. All of the radiant swirls were gone, as they'd been eaten. Today's the picnic, Ginger declared to herself as she entered the kitchen. On the table were her rock candy scissors and the dress she was cutting into bite-sized pieces. The Cookie Queen had declared a holiday picnic along the banks of the transparent lemonade river to celebrate Flower Fall, even though they knew it would not fall this time. Everyone was bringing what they could to add to the festivities. Aunt Taffy had told them weeks before about Flower Fall. It's one of the most beautiful and amazing sights in our land to see the flowers sifting from the sky, falling over the fields that stretch past the sugar pits. There's always plenty to last until the next flower fall. It's a great holiday where we all work together. Everyone uses their wheelbarrow to trek back and forth to the material mart where the flour is stored. We have a grand time, and all of us are white with flour by the time we're done. For 2 days, Ginger had spent her time preparing for the picnic. The first day, she had chipped her wintergreen mint garden fence into fine pieces to share, all of them ready in her wheelbarrow. The second day, she had shaved pieces of hot cinnamon candy from her front door. She had filled 2 baskets with the thin, curved curls of red candy. This morning's chore would finish her contribution to the picnic. She had missed Coco's company working alone, as it was the first time they had been apart in many weeks. Every day they had gone on their foraging expeditions and took their findings to the palace. They had combed and recombed the forest floor, hunting for tidbits. A few weeks past, Coco had found a chocolate leaf and declared, "This is pitiful, hardly worth picking up." The 2 girls had sunk to the ground in subdued giggles, trying not to let peals of laughter ring, as they were always on the lookout for the stranger who had not been seen since that diabolical day. "I think you're right," Ginger gasped at last. "We've hunted up all we can. It's time to quit now. Between us and everyone else, this land has been picked clean." Ginger snipped a piece off her once lovely dress and went out the kitchen door, nibbling on it for her breakfast. The sun's rays beamed over the gray remnants of Popcorn Mountain when Ginger noticed there were thick pink clouds heading toward the mountaintop. "Oh!" Ginger exclaimed, instantly excited. It was the first time she had seen clouds near the mountaintop in a very long time. With a hopeful heart, she grabbed her happy harvest basket, then jammed it inside a bigger basket and placed her dress inside. Out the door she flew, taking the shortest direct route from her home to the mountain. If those are cloud candy, I can fill my happy harvest basket, then fill the big basket besides and cover it with my dress so the candy can't escape. Oh, it would be the most wonderful treat for the picnic. Surely the smoke didn't reach that high. Please, please, please. As she approached the backside of the mountain, Ginger carefully made her way up the rocky mountainside. As she clambered around a huge boulder, Ginger spied a sight that froze her in place. There, on the other side of the boulder, was the stranger everyone had been searching for, rolled in his cloak, asleep on the ground. Ginger held her breath as she stared in wonderment. With a shake of her head, she pulled herself together and, as quiet as a whisper, sneaked back down the mountain. When she was far enough away, she gently placed her baskets down, then became a gingerbread blur racing to the palace. Cube Big was in the courtyard when Ginger breathlessly arrived. She didn't have to say a word. Cube Big scooped her into his arms and rapidly carried her into the palace to the Cookie Queen. Gasping, Ginger informed the queen of what she had discovered. The queen held out her arms, taking Ginger from Cube Big. There, sweet thing, get your breath, then tell me again. Ginger looked into those wise pecan eyes, calmed down, and related all that had happened as the queen quietly listened. This may be our only chance to capture our elusive visitor. We won't send the whole troop for him this time. The queen dispatched 4 of her largest chocolate soldiers with little Ginger, admonishing them to proceed with light feet. Ever so quietly, Ginger and the 4 soldiers approached and cautiously climbed the mountain. When they came near the huge boulder, Ginger went on tiptoe and peered around it, not even breathing. A flood of relief came as she saw the strange man was still there. As she watched, he was stomping out a small fire he'd built, then picked up his cloak and brushed crumbs from it. Ginger motioned to the chocolate soldiers and gave them the go-ahead. The soldiers leapt from behind the boulder, and 2 of them each grabbed one of the man's arms, while the other 2 each grabbed a leg, pinning him tightly in their grasp. The man was struggling and hollering, "Let me go! Let me go!" The chocolate soldiers did not relax their grip and held him firmly, while Ginger snatched up his black bag. Down the mountainside and back to the palace, the soldiers carried the man, screaming and struggling, all the way. Up close, the stranger was even stranger to see, and Ginger could not help but ask him, "What are you made of?" "Flesh!" snarled the strange man at Ginger. Then his tone changed to a sweeter, wheedling voice. "You can at least give me my bag." Ginger immediately clutched his bag tighter, and when the man's awful smile scratched itself into a deep frown, Ginger felt quite pleased with her little self. When the struggling intruder was carried into the palace and placed before the Cookie Queen, she shrewdly observed, "I see you're a human, and you must be a descendant of our great Creator. You've made our land into a land like you came from. Why have you done this? Surely you know my people can't survive in a land like this. Who are you anyway?" The man was straightening himself, but now he laughed. It was not a nice, happy laugh. Ginger found herself amazed someone could laugh and make it come out so nasty. He was very foreign indeed. The stranger answered in a mocking voice, "I am Nick Niceby, that's who I am. I am in the bloodline of the great sorcerer Chaucer, who made this land, and I'm here to take over his creation Yes, I know you and your people won't survive in a land like this. That's why I changed it. Your land of sweetness is very special and unique. Once you and your people are gone, this land will be mine, all mine. People from my land would sicken and die if they lived in a land like this and ate so many sweets all the time, but they'll pay huge amounts of money to visit this land of sweetness for vacations. That's what I'm going to allow them to do, but only the ones who have money to afford me. When you and your people are gone, I'll bring the land of sweetness back. Then it will be mine, and it will make me rich." He looked the queen in the eye and laughed his mean laugh again, but when he saw the stern gaze of the queen, he didn't seem quite so sure of himself. Big chocolate soldiers on each side still held each arm in a firm grip, and Ginger still grasped his bag tightly. All were quiet. The Cookie Queen contemplated a long time before she spoke in her sweet voice. "I see you've planned an evil plan and intend to see it through. How is it you believe this land will ever serve you or be the same without the people who live here? Don't you see we go together?" Sorrowfully she looked into his eyes. "What will you have if you have the land without the people? It is the people who have made it the unique, special land you appreciate. It's also the people that will get in the way of what I have in mind," he retorted. For a while the queen sat in silence, then came down from her throne and said to her soldiers, "Bring him. Come." The Cookie Queen did not look back as she left the castle, and Nick Knightsby had no choice but to follow with guardsmen holding him on each side. For hours the very strange man made of flesh, whatever that was, followed the Cookie Queen down hills, up hills, into homes and out of homes. He met many of her subjects, the people of the land. He sat in their homes and was offered some of the last sweets they had to eat, all of which he declined. They offered, even though they knew he was the one who had ruined their land. He heard their friendly stories, personally meeting many of them. At Aunt Taffy's, little Taffyette had climbed onto his lap and patted the strange, soft covering on his face, snuggling herself into his chest. "You smell different." "Yes, you do, but it is a nice different." "I think it is." "Yes, I do." Even though he did not smile and sat stiff as a board, Taffyette smiled and waved as though he were her dearest friend when the queen took him out the door to yet another subject's home. The trip took so many hours, the sun went down and came up again and traveled high in the sky. All the people Nick Knightsby met were curious, kind, and accepting of him exactly as he was. They were as sweet as the name of the land they lived in, every one of them. At last they arrived full circle back at the Cookie Queen's palace, and the queen once again took her seat on the royal throne. "There you have it," she told Nick Knightsby. "Now you know and are fully aware of what you intend to do." Little Ginger had followed all that time, listening and watching, always holding Nick's black bag tightly. Now the queen turned to Ginger and told her, "Ginger, be a dear and return to our guest that which is his." Ginger swallowed hard. This was not so easy on her part, but she understood and gravely held the black bag out to its owner. Then the Cookie Queen said to Nick Knightsby, "You are free to go." Chapter 19. An Unexpected Turn of Events. Nick Knightsby's strange blue eyes darted back and forth between the Cookie Queen and little Ginger, who was still offering him his bag. Suspiciously, He reached for the bag, then snatched it from Ginger's hand. The large chocolate soldiers had respectfully fallen back at the Queen's command, leaving Nick unguarded. Nick stared at the Queen with narrow eyes and watched for her reaction as he closely clutched the black bag. Her serene expression did not change as he began creeping a few steps backward from her throne. After a few more steps, he suddenly whirled around in the center of the room as though he feared there was someone sneaking up behind him. Finding no one, he kept up his cautious backstepping with more crazy whirls at the oddest moments. Ginger found herself in wonderment at his very strange departure, his wild blue eyes still darting from here to there as he made his way to the palace door. With one last weird whirl, he bolted out the door and disappeared. There was deep stillness in the throne room once Nick Knightsby was gone. Ginger sank onto the step at the bottom of the throne and sat in silence, trying to take in the significance of all that had happened. No one spoke, for they understood this was for their happiness, and with this acceptance, they were at peace. Silvery notes of their country's anthem lilted through the throne room as the angel food cake girl Angela began piping on the candy flute she loved to play. The melody filled the air, and when it ended, she began again. This time each voice joined in the music, singing in tune, "We are all one, one we will ever be. Entrusted with life's mystery, love bids us to only see the truth, which will constant be. I will always care for you as I know you will for me, for we are all one, one we will ever be." 3 times they sang their anthem together. Then once more Angela's flute played the melody until the last note hung in the air until it too disappeared, gone, just as Nick was. Hushed and quiet, the people began to move, to return to their homes when a loud "Harum" was heard at the doorway. All eyes turned to see Nick Knightsby standing in the entrance, once again making that strange sound as if he were clearing his throat. Then he advanced into the throne room, going right up to the Queen, where, after a few more throat clearings, he declared, "Your Majesty, I'm back." "I see," she remarked with a gentle voice and questioning eyes. "Well," he stammered, "I've done some thinking, your royalness, and it does appear your land and the creations go together. It would never be such a great place without you all. You have sweet subjects, and I've come to the conclusion that I want to fix what I've done to your land of sweetness." Then he glanced down at little Ginger, who was still sitting on the bottom step before the throne, then looked back at the Queen. A smile split his face with the hugest grin Ginger had ever seen. "And I can fix it!" he exclaimed. No one said a word. Nick laughed out loud then, and it was as joyous of a laugh as Ginger had ever heard. "Come on, everyone, follow me," he shouted with enthusiasm. He turned to the Queen and politely held his hand out. "Your Majesty, after you." With the Queen leading the way, the creations streamed outside the palace, where Nick pointed to a small hill, indicating that was their destination. Coco was now at Ginger's side, whispering, Do you believe him, Ginger? I mean, really believe him?" "I think I do. He looks like a different person than the stranger I first saw sneaking into the forest. Something huge has changed in him for sure, Coco. Did you see that smile? It was as genuine as a smile can be," Ginger responded. "Oh, I hope you're right, exclaimed Coco. By now the people surrounded the hill when Nick stopped, while his eyes searched the throng until they lit on Ginger. Here, my little friend, he said as he motioned her towards him. With a smile, he leaned down, arched his eyebrows at her, and then handed her his prized black bag. He straightened himself and announced, "Yes, this will do quite nicely. The breeze is blowing just right. Now, everyone, step back." As Ginger began to move away, Nick remarked, "I need you here with me," his blue eyes twinkling. He reached into the bag he had entrusted to Ginger, removed a bundle of sticks from it, and quickly built a fire at the top of the hill. Once again, he fished inside the bag Ginger held and produced a vial of purple powder marked Land of Sweetness Restoring Powder. "Stand back a little farther," he ordered, and once again the crowd moved away. He strode around the fire 3 times, each time repeating the words, "Funzabi Delicioso." Then, with flair, he scattered the purple powder into the fire. When the magic powder connected with the fire, purple smoke burst from the flames and began to roll over the land and soon blanketed the countryside. This time there was no running. Ginger stood her ground, lost in the thick smoke, which did not make her choke and gasp as the last had. The purple smoke was rather moist and foggy, faintly sweet, very different than his last batch of dark smoke. After a few minutes, the purple smoke began to thin. Wisps of it swirled into the air, lavender gossamer, which hung in the sky, then vanished. When the cloud of smoke had disappeared, the people found the land of sweetness had returned in all its sweet beauty. Their home was home. The astonished oohs and ahs at this miraculous event reminded Ginger of that day long ago when Quebec had unveiled his marvelous cold and creamy creation, which was now gleaming in the palace courtyard. Popcorn Mountain was shining white in the distance. The golden lemonade river was sparkling as it flowed in its path, and colorful sweet and sour grasses covered the brown sugar earth. Everything was exactly as it had once been. Ginger turned from the beautiful spectacle before her eyes to Nick Knightsby, who was gazing out at the wondrous change he had made. She pulled on his pant leg to get his attention and then gravely told him, "Thank you, Nick Knightsby. Thank you from the bottom of my heart." "You are most welcome, my little friend," he soberly responded as he sat beside her on the hilltop. "I think it's time we were properly introduced. You know my name, but I don't know yours." Ginger was happy to introduce herself, and Coco also. "Well, I'm very pleased to meet you both. You two may not know it, but you made an impression on me I could not forget." At their astonished faces, he continued, "The first night I changed your land, I saw the two of you go into Coco's house. I was listening outside, and I expected to hear sobbing and sighing. Weirder than weird, after a while, you two were laughing like nothing terrible had happened. How is that? I would really like to know." The girls both burst into happy laughter at his question, even as Ginger explained, "Well, when there's a choice, and there always is, why choose to be unhappy? That's all there is to it, really." The 3 of them sat on the hillside laughing, and the puzzled inhabitants stared at them, and they laughed even harder. Then the 3 of them stood together and stared at the beautiful sight before their eyes, for there in the distance it had come. Flour was falling from the skies, gently sifting onto the fields below. Altogether, it was a beautifully happy day. Chapter 20. Nick, the Blood of Chaucer. Ginger finished her work at the Material Mart just on time and hurried to the palace courtyard. She had only just arrived when Nick bounded out of the palace and down the steps. "How did it go?" Ginger questioned him. "Well, it went," he responded, walking directly to the cold and creamy creation. "You want one?" "Sure. Vanilla for me, please." Nick soon presented the icy dessert to Ginger, then plucked another leaf, commenting, "The nutty nut this time for me. I can't for the life of me decide which flavor is my favorite. Cube Big outdid himself with this." He sat on the bench beside Ginger and they enjoyed their treats. "Yes, Cube Big is an amazing inventor," Ginger remarked as she took another bite. By now Ginger had finished her treat and laughed. "Stop keeping me in suspense, Nick. I just want to know how your meeting with the Queen went." Nick's eyes twinkled as he replied, "It went splendidly. I have permission to bring a few people from my dimension to the land of sweetness for a few days at a time whenever I'd like." "Wow! I guess that means you're going to be rich like you wanted, right?" responded Ginger seriously. "Well, now, I wouldn't say that," remarked Nick. "Why not? Is it because the Queen won't let you bring enough people to get a lot of that stuff called money?" asked Ginger. Nick laughed at the little gingerbread girl on the bench beside him. Then his tone grew more serious. "That's not it at all. I've changed my way of thinking. You, of all people, can understand what I'm talking about. I don't feel the way I used to feel, and I don't want what I thought I wanted anymore. I've told you about all my planning and preparations, which took a great amount of time. Here I am, and I don't want any of it. I have a change of plans, my little friend." "Well, tell me!" Ginger exclaimed as she clapped her hands in anticipation. "The Cookie Queen educated me on my ancestor, the sorcerer Chaucer. He made this kingdom out of love for his little girl and saved her life doing it. It's a remarkable story that was lost in my world. So, how does this sound? I'm not bringing people here for pay. I'm bringing people here that I think deserve a wonderful adventure. They're out there, all kinds of them. I will know them when I meet them. There are no specific qualifications. I'm going to bring people to this land of sweetness for a few days and return them as magically as I brought them, and it's not going to be for money. It's going to be because that is how I would want it to happen for me." "Oh my," breathed Ginger. "It sounds too good to be true." "You, of all creations in this land, know it's not too good to be true," Nick smiled. Her blue eyes shining, little Ginger responded, "Yes, indeed I do. I think that your ancestor, the sorcerer Chaucer, would approve of your new plan. No doubt of that. What you're doing is for good, Nick, and just as it was meant to be all along." Epilogue, which brings us to the end, which is not the end at all. So, nowadays, Nick Knightsby visits the land of sweetness quite often. He enjoys spending time with his many good friends there. He has his own spacious building of striped green and white sour apple logs, not far from Ginger's little home. Jube and Splinter also visit the land of sweetness and love the company of the creations that consider the two wooden men as themselves. They have their own rooms in Nick's home, but always return to the cavern as they take very seriously their life purpose of being the keepers of the cavern. Often, when Nick visits the land of sweetness, he brings some fortunate people with him to stay in his cabin for a few days and enjoy their time in the magical land. The visitors he brings get to explore and eat all they would like while they are there. Within a few days, they are returned to their dimension, as Nick is very faithful in following his agreement with the Cookie Queen. His guests are always enchanted with the sweet land they are allowed to visit, and amazed that Nick, who is the only one with the ability to transport them there and back, has granted them such a wonderful adventure. Getting to the land of sweetness with Nick Knightsby is as rare as capturing cloud candy, but it is not impossible. Who knows? Maybe someday you will be one of the chosen ones who gets to visit the land of sweetness for a few days. Maybe you will have the delight of meeting little Ginger and all the other sweet creations who live there. Perhaps you will be one of the lucky ones who gets to try all 6 of Cube Big's cold and creamy creation flavors from the remarkable and beautiful tree which grows in the Cookie Queen's courtyard. I can picture you relaxing in the soft grasses on the banks of the Lemonade River, chewing tangy grass and watching for pink candy clouds near Popcorn Mountain's shining white top. There's absolutely nothing like sipping the cold lemonade through a licorice whip straw. If you wish, you could even choose to save this sweet, chewy straw for one last treat to eat on your way back home. You never know. It very possibly could be you. The end.